Hello and welcome to OPA GCSE Sociology. This lesson is what is the functionalist theory? It's lesson 5 in unit 1. So if you can get the title down for me, you can have a look through the learning objectives, and then for the do now, just for the first 3 to 4 minutes, see what you can remember about the ideas of Emil Durkheim. So you can see there are some words to fill in. If you want to then move on, once you've done that, to stretch and challenge, and just give an example of each of these ideas, each of these key concepts, and say, are they a positive or a negative? Okay, so you might want to pause the video just for the next couple of minutes, and then we'll go over it after. Right, so let's go through it then. So top left-hand corner, we've got anomie. So anomie is what Durkheim describes as the breakdown of social cohesion. So it might be when the organic analogy, where social cohesion is gone, and things slightly go into chaos. Essentially, there's social issues. So it might be an increase in crime, suicides. It might be an increase in a certain attitude. There's a range of things it could be. Durkheim doesn't always think it's a negative thing. Sometimes it can be positive, and give an example of what not to do in a mass society. It could also be an indicator of essentially social change and the teething issues of that adjustment. It could also be an indicator that something has to change. So top center now, it's social facts or societal facts. And it's essentially just a term Durkheim uses just to really say there's some macro explanation behind why something is occurring. So if there's, like I said, an increase in the crime rate, then there's some other variable in society that correlates with that. So something's going on in society to cause that. So the organic analogies, that's the one in the right-hand side. The organic analogy, we've said this a few times now. It's the idea that imagining all of the organs in your body are various structures. So it might be that your brain is education, your heart is the family, your lungs are the government. It might be, a range of different organs, and they all work together to keep you alive. Okay, and just as your organs work together to keep you alive, these structures work together to achieve sort of a stable society, as it were. And then there's social cohesion on the bottom center, and that's just the idea: if you achieve the organic analogy, if everyone's performing their roles, then everything in society is going well. And in the bottom left-hand side, the final one is the division of labor. So it's the idea that people are given different roles in society. So it might be my roles are to be a son, to be a partner, to be a friend, to be a teacher. For you guys, it might be you are a daughter or a son. You are a student at OPA. There's a range of different roles, and they change throughout society, but if everyone follows their roles, then you achieve social cohesion. Okay, so what is the functionalist theory? So functionalist theory is predominantly influenced from the ideas of Emil Durkheim. A good way to remember the core ideas of the theory is to consider the name. So functional. If in doubt, functionalists believe everything has a purpose for the functioning of society. So everything is functional. Essentially, they're quite a positivist perspective. They think everything is great in society and has a purpose. So like Durkheim, modern sociologists see society as being positive and functional. Everything has a purpose. So task 1, I want you to look at the statement in red. Which of Durkheim's ideas does this sound like? And I just want you to really make those comparisons. So simply put, functionalists argue society cannot be understood rather, as a series of isolated component parts. For example, if you want to understand the education system, you need to consider how it contributes to wider society. So education's nothing without the families that produce and then, also help along the way in educating their children. So just as education benefits from the family, the education system benefits, say, the workplace. It might help crime because it's producing the next generation of police officers or those people who are going into jobs later on and might not resort to crime. This is sometimes referred to as a consensus approach, which we will look at later in the year. Okay, so you just need to get this idea down, really. There's lots of similarities here with Durkheim. So is there anything you really noticed? I'm just going to give you a minute or two and then we're going to go through them. So just pause the video if you need it. Right, so I mean, the whole idea that it's not isolated and everything's interconnected is very similar to Durkheim's idea of the organic analogy. Okay, so just like every organ functioning to keep the body alive, society has different structures and they're connected. They don't work in isolation. And this idea of consensus is very much similar to the idea of social cohesion. Functionalists believe human relationships are governed by rules. Over time, these rules go and turn into values. The values are then practiced as norms and roles. Over time, the values, norms, and roles are passed by various social structures or institutions. So the family will influence the roles and the values that people have and the norms that people practice. I would write down those three definitions, values, norms, and roles, because they're going to come up quite a lot in sociology. So values underline behavior or beliefs that are shared in society. Norms are the acting out, the performing, and they underline values. And then a role is a formal or informal position in society with specific values and norms. So just to give an example of that, my role as a teacher, I then have values like respect. So in the classroom, I might, as a norm, act out. I might prompt someone if they're, being negative in their behavior. Or say, for example, as a teacher, again, the role, I might have the value of being punctual. So I might go around and do an equipment check, or I might prompt someone to do their top button up, something like that. Okay, so they're all interlinked. If you could get your own example down as well for each one of those as part of the structure challenge. Right, so task 3, once you've noted down norms, roles, and values, I just want you really to look at here how these institutions that the functionalists are talking about influence values, roles, and norms. So I've already given you the example there of how the institution of, for me, work and education means I have the role of a teacher, and it means I perform norms such as, checking uniform, registers, greeting you into class, make sure you're doing do-nows. On the other side of that, so we've got the family. So, my family would have encouraged the value of being polite. They would have taught me my manners. So therefore, I might, be quite punctual, and I might say things like "you're welcome," "please," and "thank you." So they're examples of norms. So moving on to the second idea of the functionalist key beliefs. Functionalists believe that there are basic needs within society to survive and prosper. And this is referred to as the functional prerequisite. In order for this to happen, there needs to be social order amongst institutions and society. So that organic analogy needs to work. Just like if an organ fails, okay, the rest of the body shuts down. In other words, what they need is a value consensus. That is where everyone shares similar values. And this is a term that is coined by someone called Talcott Parsons. Okay, so Parsons is really sort of the father of modern functionalist theory. He's writing between the 30s and the 60s. He develops the ideas of Durkheim's social cohesion with the value consensus. And I would write down this definition here of what the value consensus is. It's where our beliefs and ideas are commonly shared by a particular social group. So if you could just come up with your own values that you can think of that you share with people in a classroom. So it might be being punctual, so you're all there at a specific time. It might be being polite, so you're all quiet when I ask you to be. And hopefully you all share the value of wanting to do well in education. So just come up with your own. It doesn't have to be in the classroom, and it doesn't have to be 5. It's just really for you to illustrate, what a value is. Okay, so you might want to pause the video there and just write a few down. Okay, right, so what I'm going to do now, we've got an idea from Talcott Parsons, because he influences other things like crime and theory about crime and family and whatnot. So I'm just going to give you a moment to read through this passage and leave it on the screen. And then I just want you to answer those 2 questions. So what is the value consensus in this passage? And can you apply any of the other functionalist concepts to this passage? Okay, as a stretch and challenge, I think the critique of this is quite obvious. But yeah, just think of it. Okay, so just pause the video just for the next sort of 5 to 7 minutes, something like that, and then answer the questions. Right, so hopefully you've answered the questions now and you've read through that passage. It's quite, the sex role theory is quite a controversial one in today's society, I think. I think it's quite a dated theory. But the idea of this value consensus is that everyone's buying into their gender roles. They're buying into what the ideal family type is, the nuclear family, with the breadwinner and the housewife. Okay, and you can see that in the stat at the bottom, the fact that 82% of households are part of a nuclear family during the 1950s and 60s. It's certainly a majority. Yeah, and then moving on to question 2, applying some of those functionalist concepts. So you've got the idea here about roles, and then I gave some examples there about some of the values that you might have. So domestic work, valuing that as the housewife, and the norm would be things like cooking dinner or cleaning. And then for the man, it's as the breadwinner role, it's being instrumental at work as the value. So that might be you being as good as you can be and sort of hustling at work. Okay, and it's just in general, you can apply this idea as well with Durkheim, with social cohesion. So the idea that everything is working out, and the idea that and it's quite a controversial idea of the functionalists, that there can be enemy potentially if things don't go well and there's a dysfunctional family. So finally, we move on to the critique of functionalist theory. So going over the positives, it gives an explanation for why people perform certain values. So why it's kind of a strange thought, why we all do the same things and why things run so smoothly. And it gives an explanation for why some families are dysfunctional, whether you agree with it or not, but also society as well. So it explains why crime is the rate it is, or why obesity is an issue, why suicide and mental health issues are what they are. It does have its issues, though. It does assume there is this value consensus. It assumes everyone has the same or shares the same values. Not everyone, say in the classroom, wants to do well in a subject, unfortunately. Not everyone shares the same value about being polite or punctual. People are very different. And yes, a lot of people might share values, but it's not a guarantee. It also ignores a lot of social inequality. So it ignores class inequality, gender inequality, race, age. I mean, you just have to look at the sex role theory to see sort of the sexual discrimination there, in terms of assuming a woman's place is in a kitchen, and assuming that a man's place is out at work. And that leads nicely into the next point. He's writing these ideas predominantly, like I said, in the 50s, between the 30s and the 60s. Society's moved on quite a lot since then. There's lots of diverse family types. There is lots of different explanations for why crime is what it is, and people perform lots of different roles. So it needs modernizing, and you don't really see many sociologists today applying functionalist theory. It's a very dated theory. And then finally, it doesn't really consider diversity in society in general. It assumes there is just one. And I'm going to apply that as well to family types. It assumes there is this sort of dysfunction in diverse family types. But as society's going on, especially over the last 20, 30 years, Britain's family types are becoming a lot more diverse, lots more people cohabiting, or single parent families, or blended families, and they function fine. And this is something you're going to see later on as well of the new right. So finally, it's one of those questions, again, I'm not going to help you with it or tell you how to answer it. I'm actually interested to see how you answer it. A bit like I said in the last lesson, we're going to be marking this, or I'm going to be marking it and giving you feedback and showing you what you need to improve in the coming weeks. So don't worry about the structure, just get straight into it and answer the question. So the question is the following: identify and explain one criticism of functionalism. So you've got the critique here, really. You can also refer to some of the critique of Emil Durkheim. Okay, so that was lesson 5 now in Unit 1. The next lesson, we're going to be going over Marxist theory and explaining what it is and what the strengths and weaknesses of that are. Okay.